This video is for entertainment purposes only. Hi there. Thank you for visiting my channel. And if you are new, welcome. Please do not forget to press the subscribe button. Give a thumbs up for like, leave a comment, and please do share. Now, this is the 7th video of a series of videos I've been doing on the Playbook of Supremacist Ideology and Practices. It's a rather long playbook, and all of us have been guilty of doing something in that playbook, ticking off one of those boxes, whether in this lifetime or another. We have, after this one, 2 more to go. The next one, I will be discussing something about reincarnation, actually, and its facts, because I am the lived, we all are lived and living examples of it. But one of my tasks in this lifetime that I chose was to be the lived example and living example of the fact that is reincarnate, the truth, that is reincarnation and its facts. And in that one, you'll probably wonder why I have a bandage on my or band-aid on my forehead. Well, it's a very interesting event that ties in with the truth that is reincarnation and its many facts, and going back into past lives and what happens. Now, I'll discuss that in the next video, at the beginning of the video on debunking, using facts to debunk supremacist ideology and practices. And the last one in the series will be, I'll go through each point that we've already discussed, and I'll tick those off with an example. I'm going to compare the Nazis and the state of Israel, and we will tick them off with examples. And then at the end of it, we'll see who has ticked off, which one of those states ticks off the most, if not all, of those boxes in that playbook. And I will just tell you now, I've said it before, it is Israel, actually. They outdo the Nazis, and we'll go through and discuss that. That's the end of that. Will be the end of the series of videos on the Playbook of Supremacist Ideology and Practices. And then after that, I will begin now another series on slavery. And that's equal opportunity. And slavery didn't just start with Black people. It has been with us from man's sojourn on earth. From the first time man appeared on earth, slavery has existed, and it will, you will learn quite a bit, actually. For example, the longest lasting slave society was actually Korea, lasted for almost 1,000 years. And then, of course, we have the Roma, or the Romani, and they endured about 500 years of slavery in Romania. So we'll cover all of that. We'll take what I want to call a Mobius, like a Mobius strip, like a trip around the world through different societies throughout the ages, from the very beginning when it comes to slavery. So before I begin this particular video and getting to the meat and the crux of it all, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Winifred Davis. I have been a shaman, a psychic medium, a traditional and spiritual healer and counselor for the past 37 years, and in another couple of months it will be 38 years. I am also an author, essayist, poet, and former spoken word movement performer. I subscribe to no religion, and when I say I subscribe to no religion, I mean I subscribe to no religion. Don't make any mistakes or believe that I do because maybe I might speak about one religion or other. I subscribe to no religion. I believe in universal justice and truth. With the impostor justice of man, there is an exception to every rule. But with universal justice, there are no exceptions to its rule. And the truth has no my side, no your side. It stands unopposed. We're not entitled to our own truth. Now, please remember that I'm not here to lead anyone. I'm not here to convert anyone, just as I don't want anyone to lead me, because each man must evolve according to his own light. And as I deliver my messages, take it or leave it. If you don't understand something, I will explain that is part of my duty, to explain what I have said. But not to force you or to convince you of what I have said. It's up to you. Each man must evolve according to his own light. Now, I'm here, as I said, to deliver messages from the collective. I'm just a vessel. Now, who comprise the collective? The collective is comprised of members of the higher hierarchies, including the archangels and my guides, my many guides. Each of us, we're not special if we say that we are in contact with the archangels. Each of us has the capacity and the ability to communicate with the archangels. Now, the messages that they give me at times are very brutal, but so is the truth, right? It might be brutal and it might be an offense to our ears, but it's not a sin. And when we look in that mirror, what I call the mirror of self-reflection, sometimes the reflection, the image that we see in that mirror is not a very pretty sight. I know that. But face that reflection we must, if we are going to become, I don't want to use the word, but for lack of a better word, if we're going to become better people, if we're going to ascend up that ladder of soul restoration, please do not freely interpret what I say. Say exactly what I say. And as I said before, if you do not understand something that I have said, please feel free to ask me in the comments below or email me. My email is listed below as well. Now, if I say that the sky is blue, I mean the sky is blue. It is not sky blue, even though it's the sky. Sometimes sky blue doesn't even apply to the blue that we see in the sky. It is not, I didn't say marine blue, navy blue, turquoise blue. I said blue. That encompasses all shades of blue. And if I say that a tiny fish is swimming in a small aquarium, that's what I mean. Because when you interpret and then interpret whatever is said to someone else, and they do their interpretation, and by the time you get to the 10th person, that tiny fish has become a big old whale, and a whale is not even a fish, it's a mammal. And that small aquarium has become a vast ocean. And believe me, a small aquarium is not a vast ocean. Now, I deliver my messages as I get them. And as my great-grandmother, and sometimes I say my grandmother, but it's my great-grandmother, it's just a slip of the tongue. My great-grandmother, she used to say, some me get it, some me sell it. So as I get the message, or any messages, I deliver them just as is. And if my interpretation when I'm writing is off, my guides will tell me that it's off. And I just find it very difficult to actually use my pen to explain them. It just doesn't flow. Now, I call out injustice and folly when I see it. It doesn't matter who or which group, what race, color, religion, or whatever. Do not use what I call out as an excuse to advance bigotry, whether it be prejudice, whatever it is. Do not. Right? I was born in Jamaica. I'll call out my Jamaican brothers as well. I'm black, I'll call out my black brothers as well. I'm female, I will call out my female sisters as well. Right? Just as I would call out and say, this whole nonsense, I call it, to say that the world would be a better place if women were the rulers. No, don't drink that Kool-Aid, because women are just as cruel and as kind as their male counterparts. And in fact, many of the heinous things, misogynistic acts that occur in different societies are usually advanced. Women are the enforcers, and we can give all the excuses and say, oh, well, they're working within the framework of the patriarchy. Well, no. Do not lay the actions that we do at the foot of the patriarchy. We must go according to our conscience, and that conscience is our guide. My duty is only to my conscience, and that conscience I was given at creation as the light to guide the free will each of us was given at creation. That's what makes us responsible for our own actions. That's, and I realize when I say for our own actions, I'm being redundant here, but I'm being redundant to emphasize our own actions. That's what makes us responsible. We cannot blame our general. We cannot blame our king, country, the bully, demon, or devil for our actions. The buck stops with us. Now, moving on, at times, I will discuss at length current events as I see fit, because they're very relevant to the truth. That is reincarnation and its facts. This is a very special cup runneth over period. That's what I call it. Of greater, there are very few greater transitions. Transition is always happening, and like apocalypse, end times, revelations, all these things, they happen all the time in different societies, different places, on a small scale. But this one in particular, and it's very few of them, affect all the earth and all of humanity. None of us can escape. So that's why I call it cup runneth over. That's when there's been so much karmic debt incurred, collective karmic debt incurred, for example. And it's just like so much is going on, and we have to deal with the climate. And we have to deal with the climate because, well, we've all contributed, whether in this lifetime or another. Sorry about that. I had an urgent call at my door. So let us move on, carry on. Please do not forget that there is no peace in Gaza. And the genocide, the ethnic cleansing continues. And whilst we're all busy with what's going on in Iran, everyone seems to forget. I shouldn't say everyone, but the eyes have turned away. Too many eyes have turned away from Gaza as Israel continues with its atrocities in Gaza and in Lebanon, where they're leveling southern Lebanon, and the Lebanese government seems not to care because it's not just Shias who live in southern Lebanon. There are a lot of Christians who live in southern Lebanon. And, right there you can see where they're praying, Israel and America, praying for civil war. And it's just horrible. And all those, I love history, as you can tell. And when I think about all those historic places, history being leveled and destroyed by the state of this terrorist state. Because what else can we say? It was a state founded on, built with, and by, and continues with terror. And the history of the soul, as we know, explains why. So let us not forget those children who are suffering in Gaza, all the civilians who are suffering, but especially the children and the babies in Gaza, the children and the babies in Lebanon, and in Iran. As if Menab was not enough. Could you imagine in southern Iran, that cancer hospital for children? This is where these miscreants decide to bomb. Menab was not enough. And in the days to come, there will be other atrocities that they will commit, but they will not be victorious. Let us not forget the children in Sudan and the millions there that are in the state of famine, the genocide that is being committed there. Let us not forget the DRC, that's the Congo, and any areas in this world where there are zones of conflict, where children are suffering. And also, let us not forget the children of the perpetrators like Israel, because they're also traumatizing their own children. And sure enough, they will also teach them to hate. But let us not forget the children because of adults and their forever wars. And you can go on my website and you'll find listed under kindness, the section on kindness, different organizations that you can donate to. A lot of UN agencies and what have you for refugees and children. So please do not forget to do that. Now, as I said before, this video is for entertainment purposes only. Now we're going to discuss negative exceptionalism and bad-mindedness. In Jamaica, they call envy, covetousness, bad-mindedness. This is where only you believe that only you alone should prosper and no one else. And there's a lot of that that dictates the actions of people of all races, all colors, all ethnicities, all religion, all over the world. That is something that is within, well, they'll say human nature. But that's speaking in terms of the prison of our senses, not in spiritual terms. That's one of the weaknesses of the soul, and that is usually supremacist ideology and practices. Only you alone should prosper, so then you'll be the top dog. The quest for power. Now, negative exceptionalism, too often, the aspect of exceptionalism that we choose to practice. We can be exceptional, as I'm going to discuss here, and I'll stick to my reading, but it could be in a good way, where we strive to be the best that we can. So our greatest competitor is ourself. Being the best that we can be. We don't care about how great somebody else is. Kudos to them, but being our best. We are our best competitors. And if your best happens to be less than somebody else's best, so it is. You did your best. And you shouldn't try to cut that person down or to block that person because their best was better than your best. Embrace their best and embrace your best because that was your best. Now, as I said, negative exceptionalism too often is the aspect of exceptionalism that we choose to practice. And it is part of the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. The masks, remember those stupid masks I call them, most often used to practice exceptionalism are gender, race, ethnicity, color, socioeconomic status, religion, and political persuasion. Now, this leads us to enslave, discriminate, and keep other groups and other individuals, other masks, us versus them, in an apartheid state, such as what South Africa did, such as what Israel is doing, and what Jim Crow and segregation was all about. Or through deliberate and wanton destruction of other groups so that they cannot prosper. Negative exceptionalism achieved through cheating is not exceptionalism at all. It is an oxymoron. Negative exceptionalism, because if you have to cheat, you're not exceptional. It makes no sense. Negative exceptionalism is the road leading to mediocrity and failing upwards. And that's what we see in America right now. When these want to be these macho, like a Pete Hesgett with his now testosterone tests and treatment that he wants to give to men, and he's all about you gotta be in shape, but he can't even do a pull-up. I don't even think he can even do a push-up. Now, and then you cut out the women. You don't want them to be in the army. And the blacks, you try to deny them so that you can run ahead because you're mediocre. That's what these people are. Mediocre. So, once again, negative exceptionalism, when you think only you alone should prosper, and so you want to cheat in order to get ahead, that leads to mediocrity and failing upwards, and that helps to destroy a society. Now, empire building with different groups, conquering others throughout the ages, is negative exceptionalism. colonialism and manifest destiny, and we discussed manifest destiny before, are negative exceptionalism. The apartheid state of South Africa and South Africa occupied Namibia were negative exceptionalism, as is the state of Israel and its apartheid state in the West Bank and Gaza, where it keeps its boots on the neck of the Palestinian people, enchaining them with shackles on their hands and feet so that they will never be free to live, much less to thrive and prosper. Now, negative exceptionalism is Israel in cahoots with America and the acquiescence of most of the countries of the EU. The UK, well, that's the mother, right? And others in their project of balkanization, trying to destroy every functioning or powerful Muslim and Arab state by inciting civil strife within those sovereign states so that it becomes the top dog, free to do what it will, with the resulting supplicant, petty vassal states. And that's what it has done in Libya, for example, in Syria, for example, in Iraq, Lebanon. But at the same time, we have to now look at even, say, the Gulf states and their animosity towards Iran. And one can say maybe Iran also has animosity towards them, but they have tried, along with the West, for over 47 years to knock Iran out. And, we won't get into that. We'll say, the Shia, Sunni. And as my guide Umar says, it is time for the energy of Saladin, because Muslims are facing an existential threat. And not just Muslims, but all the people, whether they're Christians or Zoroastrians or Jews. The Jews, for example, in Iran, not liked at all by the state of Israel. All these people, they're brown, they're white, they're black, they're of different colors, different races, different religions. And the oldest Christians are to be found in the Levant and along the east coast of Africa, older than any Christians in Europe. These people, all of these people, are facing an existential threat from Israel and the wider West. Now, they've all got to get together. And for 47 years, Iran has never prospered, benefited, while all the neighbors around it did, from their oil and from the Strait of Hormuz. They all banded together with the West to keep Iran down. I'm not saying Iran is not perfect, but that's what they have done. But the circle has now, everything has come full circle. Now, as I said, one day, perhaps sooner than it thinks, Israel will not have the backing of America. Now, I wrote this back in 2024, so I'm giving you excerpts from my book, Thoughts on the Past, Volume 1. It is Thoughts on the Past, the Masks, and Equal Opportunity. Now, I wrote this then. I published this back in September 2025, but it was written part of some essays as well back in 2024. Well, we see what's happening now. We'll not have the backing of America, which is in the process of destroying itself, as both Israel and America seem to be entangled in a death spiral. You can check my book. I go into details about that. The chaos and civil strife it is busy sowing, both are busy sowing, America and Israel, as I mentioned in my books, will become their lot. And we see that happening in America, and we see that happening in Israel. It's coming. It is already proving to be so. So a man soweth, so shall ye reap. And remember now, karma, the law of karma, is not about revenge. It is about balance, bringing about equilibrium, but sometimes it plays out and looks like revenge. And, you know, you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And in Jamaica, they have a saying that while you're there abroad, a fast in other people's business, fear the backyard spoil. So while you're busy meddling, which is America, and other, you know, throughout history, other empire builders or wannabe empire builders, busy meddling in other places, all over the world, you're spread all over the world, meddling, trying to rule, be the hegemon. You are not paying attention to what's happening in your country. And well, we see what's happening in America now. The exact chaos that they've spread from Latin America throughout Asia, the Middle East, for decades, is now playing out in America. And that is through the temporal lens, but we know exactly why that happens through the eyes of the soul, the spiritual lens. Now, exceptionalism is fundamental to the American psyche that advocates exclusion. Thus, the need to always separate and segregate. Inherent in flawed men, and all of us are flawed, is the urge to be exceptional, to satisfy our need, to separate and segregate. It is this exceptionalism in its negative and destructive form that becomes bad-mindedness, as they say in Jamaica. Only we should prosper, and there is no room for anyone else to prosper. This bad-mindedness resulted in the Oklahoma race riots in the 1920s in America, in what was the Black Wall Street, you know, most prosperous Black district, if you want to put it that way, in America. So during the Oklahoma race riots, okay, so let me go back to reading here. We often seek to be exceptional by eliminating our competition, the unfair way, such as setting fire to our competitors' business. Now, it is the businessman, and I can speak to that. It is the businessman who goes to the shaman like me and asks that shaman to put their competitor out of business so that nobody goes into their competitor's business. Rather than asking the shaman, like me, to clear all the negative energies and uplift their vibration and attract more positive energies, the businessman seeks to put his competitor out of business. And my experience, my 37 plus years experience with this is many times that has happened. And my advice to that, to whoever comes with that, and that was also my husband's advice, and he was awesome, exceptional, was I will look after your business, and I will look after you, and I will uplift your business so that more customers, more clients will come and patronize your business. And what do? We ignore their request and tell them point blank, because when you come to me, I am forthright, and I will tell you just as I see it. I'm not gonna, as they would say, pussyfoot around. No, I don't monkey around. I tell you what it is. And I'm not gonna do stuff like that. You need to look after yourself. Never mind about somebody else. You don't have to put someone else down in order for you to rise. Concentrate on you. Now, rather than, okay, so this business person who would come to you to put their competitor out of business, rather than offering, for example, better quality goods, better service, and or cheaper prices than the competitor, the businessman might also decide to employ other means as well, other than the shaman. So you spread lies and propaganda or physical intimidation, such as burning down the competitor's business. If this businessman would make an effort and compete in a fair way, then he could truly be exceptional. Customers would be well served with fair competition, better service, lower prices, and or better quality. And we can transfer that to societies that keep down one sector of their society. You know, like, for example, the American Manchurian regime and Jim Crow and segregation and all of that. That country is denying itself of being the best. Because let's take an athlete. When you deny a person because of their race, so they can't compete, that person might be the one who is the best in the world, but no, through you and your racism, for example, you're okay with your mediocrity. So your best is going to run the mile, for example, in 60 seconds, right? Or I should say, run 400 meters in 60 seconds. Whereas if you didn't deny that black athlete, you could hold that record, because that black athlete, or it could be a brown athlete, would run even faster than 60 seconds. So you're settling for mediocrity, and they're okay with mediocrity because they're mediocre in their minds. And I just want to add this before I move on. The American psyche, and so when you become an American, and it doesn't matter whether you're black or white or brown, the American psyche, as we know it right now, in spite of all the racism and all the stuff that goes on, all the bigotry, the American psyche is one of supremacy. And so whether you're black or brown or white, as an American, most believe that they are superior to other people. And so you'll get, like, for example, and I'll say this is not just, you'll get the Black American psyche, for example, African American psyche, where too many of them believe that they're actually superior to people, other blacks who come from the Caribbean. That's a fact. And as I say, I don't hold me mouth a ground fi talk. Left me make me talk. I will say what I have to say. I don't care who it offends. The truth is just the truth. They do believe that. So the American psyche, doesn't matter what, for most, is one of supremacy compared to other people. That's how they look. They're superior. They're exceptional to other people. And it goes for black, white, brown, or pink. Now, Jim Crow and segregation and the Jim Crow 2.0, dog whistle, anti-DEI policies are negative exceptionalism. To reach its goal of mediocre exceptionalism for losers, that's what that is. Like, for example, the American Manchurian regime, that's mediocre exceptionalism for losers. The current American Manchurian regime has accelerated its assault on the same groups that were targeted by the Nazis, including black people and other peoples of color, LGBTQ plus people with disabilities, intellectuals, and those who do not share their views. Because we must say they're anti-intellectuals. Well, I wish they would pick up a book and learn to read. It would serve them and their country better. The regime, filled with virulent anti-Semites in strange bedfellow relationships with Zionist Christians, most of whom are anti-Semites, and Zionist Jews, have weaponized anti-Semitism. So you have your Zionist Jews like a Bill Ackman or a Larry Ellison, these people. So all these people have united, right? And the Anti-Defamation League, they've united with these Zionist Christians and these white supremacists who are anti-Semites, actually. They've weaponized all these people in what seems to be a strange bedfellow relationship, but it's not really through the eyes of the soul, have weaponized anti-Semitism to attack institutions of higher learning. However, Jews are still the targets, as we see books, displays, memorials in different departments I'm talking about the American Manchurian regime, referring to the Holocaust or the persecution of Jews or their accomplishments being silenced. And that's what they're doing at the same time, that they're pretending that they're lovers of Jews and they're not anti-Semites. That's exactly what they're doing. If you go on the website, different governmental websites, where they're making invisible and voiceless, black people, Jews, brown people. So you see right there, you see the inanity of it all. The person and being silenced and made invisible, while the main target group of America's negative exceptionalism has been black people or other peoples of color, including Native Americans, have also been targeted. America is the current poster child for negative exceptionalism practiced within the country and the means it has used and still uses to advance this tool from the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. Now, if you will recall in my other videos where I spoke about the two faces Cyrus' Bill of Rights and Hitler's Aryan Paradise, where we show America has two faces, right? And even the Nazis thought that America was over the top with its racism. Even the Nazis. So just imagine that. But remember now, America is the child of Britain, as is Israel. And when it comes to exclusion, and you think about Ireland, for example, and as it went through the different colonial possessions, you'll see that was their MO, exclusionism. That was them. Now, as a matter of fact, America has used certain immigrant group of peoples of color to continue to oppress Black people. The civil rights and other positive outcome resulting from the struggles of Black people in America have been to the benefit of and pave the way for other peoples of color who are facilitated and used as comparisons model minorities to show that Black people are inferior to all other groups because new immigrants surpass them as a group in education, economics, notwithstanding that the American systemic objective in all areas is to keep this group, Black people, doesn't matter whether you're African Americans or from elsewhere, right? Black people, at the bottom of the hierarchy, right? So you have Americans, whether they're immigrants or born in America, citizens of from South Asia, from the Indian subcontinent, are viewed as a model minority. And then you have people like Dinesh D'Souza and like a Kash Patel and a Vivek, what's his name, Ramaswamy. Like, they see that they are model minorities, and so, they poo-poo on Black people all the time. Like Dinesh D'Souza, the things he would say about President Obama, so they see themselves as, and so that's why for them, when, the racism of MAGA attack them, they're shocked, absolutely shocked. Oh, really? Well, they would say they just experience their Negro moment. Now, that is the American enterprise to help explain slavery, to show that Black people are genetically inferior. However, many in America are so keen to push this narrative that Black people are inferior and use model minorities to advance their agenda. They have missed the fact that perhaps the best model minority in the last decades is Black. Nigerians are the most educated group of immigrants in America, backed up by data, statistics. I like to deal in facts, polls, data, statistics to back it up. And the references are in my book. This one is by Rush. It was published in 2025. Nigerians also surpass the US-born population on average when it comes to education. These statistics and conclusions are taken in a narrow context without delving into the questions of the backgrounds of the Nigerians who arrive in America, like their socioeconomic background, educational background. But really doesn't matter, right? But we know that Nigerians would never be considered we know that Nigerians would never be considered a model minority because they wear the masks, those stupid masks of black and the masks of African. They cannot be so easily absorbed into the anti-black, white supremacist, racist movements seeking to expand its numbers to destroy black people, as the Italians and other Southern Europeans, the Irish, and others who were once targets of the KKK have. So if we recall, the largest mass lynching in America were of Italians at the turn of the ending and the very beginning of the 20th century, the ending of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century. I can't remember exactly what date, but around that time in New Orleans. So that was the largest because they saw Italians, number one, they like black people and mafia and what have you, and they ripped them to shreds and cannibalism, and it was just horrible. So remember now, and you will find many of those of Italian background, and of course, well, we know the Irish, right? The Irish have always, been at the bottom, and then because they're also Catholics, and remember that, America was white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant. If you happen to be Catholic, and well, Irish, of course, and then of course coming from Southern Europe, which they would consider, well, the darker Europeans, then you were target. But now they've been absorbed, and so you'll find many members of the KKK and the white supremacist groups, they are of their Irish descent, Italian descent, and so on. Now, this is not a conspiracy theory. The facts, I deal in facts. The facts have shown in our earlier discussions, and we will show them later on as I go through. Racism has been purified, sanctified, and refined in America. The Nazis knew this and saw America as an Aryan paradise. This is an ugly truth that we must face in order to get over it. Black people were barred from many sports. When baseball and other sports were integrated, they excelled. Other sports were understood to be off limits to black people. Black people were not visible in sports such as tennis, swimming, hockey, golf, ice skating, and gymnastics. The financial requirements served as a powerful tool to keep the sport out of bounds for many black people. Nonetheless, the pseudoscientists would spread such myths as swimming, for example, that black people cannot float and do not have the body structure to float or swim. These pseudoscientists also reasoned that blacks could never succeed in ballet because they did not have the body type to do so, hair type, and the list of absurdities go on. According to their pseudoscience, their body mass, black people's body mass, prevented them from engaging in sports or other activities in the arts that required finesse and grace. Well, we know that's all nonsense, right? Because I've mentioned this many times over. Most of the sailors on the English ships during the Middle Ages, they didn't know how to swim, believe it or not. So they used black people, black Africans. They were the swimmers. Many of them were navigators. They were the divers, and that included women. So that's a whole bag of nonsense. Most of the crew members on British ships, which I just said I should just keep reading, during the Middle Ages, I guess I could probably say I don't need to read, right? I could just speak with you and keep looking at you, but I would forget stuff. During the Middle Ages, could not swim, and so ships had to depend on the expert skills of Africans and African slaves to deep dive into the oceans. African women were also expert divers who often dived to collect cowrie shells, which had monetary and cultural value and sometimes used by some to predict future events. So, as I discussed in the past video, psychics, sometimes they use cards, like it doesn't matter what you use. Some people actually use sand, as some of the Berber diviners, and I happen to have been one in a past lifetime in the Sahara Desert, going between what we now know as Mauritania and Morocco. And they use sand as well, and cowrie shell. For example, in Senegal, cowrie shells are sometimes used to tell the future, just as the tarot is used in Turkey or Turkey. They use coffee grounds. Some people use tea leaves and water and crystal balls, and the list goes on. Just a little sidetrack there. Now, swimming is second nature for many who live near bodies of water. Doesn't matter what race, what color, what ethnicity, right? If you live near bodies of water, you usually know how to swim, including on these bodies of water, whether they're rivers, sea, ocean, throughout the world. What of the fishermen, for example, in the Caribbean, or black people in America? Well-known black swimmers disproving this pseudoscience include Enith Brigida, or Enith Brigida, in the Netherlands. And then we have Charles Jackson French. This was back in 1919. He was born in 1919 to 1956. We have Charles Chapman, Simone Manuel, Nathalie Hines, and Colin Jones, Anthony Nesty, and John Taylor. Ballet dancers like Michaela Mabinti du Prince, Catherine Dunham, Raven Wilkinson, Arthur Mitchell, Navir Mohammed, and Misty Copeland. She's a principal dancer now in America, and Dada Masilo, who fuse, and she's a South African dancer, who fuse classical ballet with South African dance. All these people I've named, well, she passed on in 2024, unfortunately. Dada Masilo. All these names that I've given prove the fallacy of this pseudoscience. Of course, you have athletes like Venus and Serena Williams in tennis, and Arthur Ashe, Althea Gibson. They prove that black people, when they have the chance, can and will excel in tennis. And then you have new ones coming up. Black tennis players Canada has a couple of them. You have in America as well, and elsewhere. There are others in America and elsewhere, as I just said, Tony McKegney and the Saban brothers in hockey. They're of Jamaican parentage. Simone Biles and others in their respective sports. Well, with Simone Biles, with gymnastics, and then back in the 70s and into the 80s, the Cuban gymnastics team. They had blacks on there. What about them? And I think at one point the team placed 8th. This was back, when Russia, and you had Ludmila Teresheva, I think it was, and Olga Korbut, and Nelly Kim. I remember those were Russian gymnasts. Yes, I used to follow gymnasts. I'm a sports person as well. I used to follow those, right? Follow gymnastics, for example, as track and field, fencing, swimming and diving, and with Greg Louganis, for example. And you had Mark Spitz as well for swimming. Yeah, was swimming or diving? I can't remember now. But anyways, so I used to watch sports. So you have all these people, the Cuban gymnastics team. In each of these sports, there have been more than one black athlete rising to the top to dispel any attempt to say that this is a one-off. Through the eyes of the soul, we know that our talents have nothing to do with the different masks we wear, but is dedicated by our experiences in our past lives, our different karmic journeys. So, for example, you can have someone who's not skilled in diplomacy, never been to school to study political science or, anything like that. But guess what? They can be skilled negotiators because they've done that in a past life or in many past lives. You could be an awesome businessman because you've been maybe a trader in a past life or many other past lives. Maybe you were one of the pharaohs who was skilled in keeping your political opponents in check. You knew how to do it because you have that emotional intelligence, or you are astute to human nature. Doesn't have to, it's all of these things that makes us who we are. The skill set. We might give something a name, the vocation a name, but what does that vocation entail? What skills? That is the skill set. So you can have a Roman soldier, right? Someone who was a Roman officer in a past life, but that person, what does that mean when you were a Roman soldier, or especially a Roman officer? The discipline. You were probably skilled in certain you had to have administrative skills. You had to be a strategist. You had to be quick thinking. You have to pay attention to details. You had to be a logistician. You had to be able to get along with people because that's how you would keep your soldiers together. There was honor. You had to be honorable. You had to be intellectually up there. You had to be analytical. You had to have critical thinking skills. So we have to consider that, and that is what we mean by the journey of your soul, the experiences that you have had in other and past lifetimes. That's what determines who you are and how good you are at something. And yes, we have to go to school, but you can have doctors. You have doctors and you have doctors. You go to school to medical school to get the skills and how medicine is practiced now. But you will realize you have the doctors who go according to the book, and you have the born doctors. Yes, they go according to the book. But what happens when you have more symptoms or something else is going on? Do you know how to extrapolate? Those are born doctors. So let me get back to this now. But I just had to explain certain things, and a lot of what I just mentioned about the soul journey and our skill set, vocations, and who we are, I discuss in my upcoming book, on reclaiming past lives. Nefertiti and the reunion or the reincarnation of Nefertiti and Akhenaten. How to reclaim past lives, using them as a case study in reclaiming past lives. Now, another example of negative exceptionalism are the actions of many in America and what I call the back to the good old days politics, and the Supreme Court to undo affirmative action, to remedy, right? To level the playing field, so to speak, the centuries-old systemic discrimination against Black people in all aspects of their lives, including in educational and employment opportunities. Affirmative action policies were instituted under the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and by executive order in 1965 during the Johnson administration. He was in from 63 to 69. Affirmative action increased access to programs and policies with limited preferences to Black people, and who suffered in areas such as admissions to post-secondary institutions, job hiring, government contracts to Black people. Now, Black people were not the only ones who would benefit from affirmative action. While affirmative action might have been enacted to help to remedy the systemic racism and discrimination faced by Black people in, education, employment, and other areas of their lives, as I had stated before, it has actually been white women as a group who have benefited the most from it. These are facts. This is not conspiracy theory. These are facts, and the references, reputable sources, are listed in my book. Other groups benefiting have included people with disabilities, veterans as well, LGBTQ, and other peoples of color. In 2023, that disreputable Supreme Court in America, in another one of its in the vein Dred Scott-like decision, ruled in favor of the plaintiffs in the case Student for Fair Admissions versus Harvard, invalidating affirmative action in most college admissions. Now, as I previously said, since the institution of affirmative action policies, there have been a dogged determination. So this is it was enacted in the 60s, a dogged determination of many in America to roll back these policies. And using the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices, these miscreant souls weaponized victimhood, crying that they are the victims of discrimination. So the people who have their boots on the neck of the victim are crying, and that is so typically supremacist ideology and practices. Boots on the neck of the victim, and they, the abusers, are crying out that they are the victims. This Supreme Court decision was obviously music to the ears of these souls who have since the 1980s managed to turn around the forward moving train in the opposite direction at an accelerated speed on what I call in my other videos a Benjamin Button-esque going backwards. You're growing backwards, so you were born as an adult, but then as you grow, you're actually shrinking, then you're growing back to infancy. So it's reversed. Journey to the good old days. Whenever you hear them talking about the good old days were for the few, but they were the bad old days for the many. To the good old days, as I said, for the few, that were the bad old days for the many, including the majority of those who helped to turn it around. Without remedy to systems founded on and embedded with bigotry and impediments for any target group, there will never be a level playing field, and that society will be on the road to mediocrity, failing upwards. And the perfect poster child example of failing upwards and mediocrity is the man with the cloaca mouth. The golden calf, but the gold is not real, it's fake. The whore of Babylon that sits in the people's house in America. He is the poster child of what we mean failing upwards. He knows nothing. He is illiterate, functionally illiterate. He's a narcissist. He's failed. He's bankrupted every business he's ever had. And the list goes on. He's a criminal, a convicted felon, and adjudicated rapist. And, well, we don't know what's in the Epstein files. Everything, the worst that you can think. The former Ernst Röhm, reincarnated. He was Ernst Röhm in Nazi Germany. That's the poster child of failing upwards, and he now sits in the people's house at the head of what was the most powerful country in the world. That's how societies and empires fall. And we're seeing that in real time. Now, those, I say, who brought that lawsuit, and I think actually was a student of Chinese descent. Was he of Canadian? Was he Canadian? I can't remember now. But who brought that suit? And then, of course, the supremacist groups, they added their names to it as well. Those who brought the suit might very well find that it was not to their benefit and face many Negro moments, for they have stepped on what is a very slippery slope of unintended consequences, because many of these people, model minorities and people of color, they believe that they're superior to black people and that black people are not very intelligent either. So they believe that if black people get into going through certain programs, get into places like Harvard, they believe that these black people are not smart. Well, the fact of the matter is, it is the best of those black people who are getting in there. because black people have to work 5 times as hard to get anywhere. So think about that. Now, suffering does not ennoble. We wear many masks, and the one to which we gravitate will be the one with the most power. It's like, for example, the Zionist Jews, like that Zionist billionaire Bill Ackman. What has he ever done, for humanity? He, for example, believes, and he went after the black lady who was the head of Harvard, and she had to resign. And at the same time, he was saying that she plagiarized, while his wife, who was also a plagiarist, he, for example, believes that black people should just be cleaning Harvard. They shouldn't be anywhere else but the cleaners. That he's a Zionist Jewish billionaire, Bill Ackman, and he also believes that the war that Israel, because he's an Israel first person, believes that the war on Iran, he believes that they should put boots on the ground because it is a noble cause to get into Iran and erase the Iranian civilization. And then one wonders, why doesn't he go and volunteer? Or if he has children or relatives who are of the age to enter the U.S. Army, if it is such a noble cause to die for, he should send his relatives or himself to go and die for that noble cause. But such is the playbook of supremacy ideology and practices. Now, as we say, suffering does not ennoble. And because I am black, doesn't mean that, I've suffered discrimination. That doesn't mean that I'm not going to discriminate against someone who happens to be Mexican. It happens all the time. Because I'm Jamaican, I've suffered discrimination elsewhere. Doesn't mean that I'm not going to discriminate against someone who happens to be gay. No, we see that all the time. Suffering does not ennoble. And as Art Spiegelman says, all suffering does is make us feel pain, but doesn't ennoble. We wear many masks, and the one to which we gravitate will be the one with the most power. Too many of us will join in the fight, not to help the victim, but to help kick those victims, or kick that victim, and put our boot on their neck as well. Knowing what we do about the soul and its journey, this is not surprising. In Jamaica, they say, today for me, tomorrow for you. Every puss at them 4 o'clock. Today for me, tomorrow for you. Every cat has its 4 o'clock. Every puss at them 4 o'clock. While today is my turn, tomorrow will be yours. So do not rejoice at my misfortune. Every cat has its day. All of us has our day of reckoning. Before moving on from this point, it begs to ask the question as to why this group, the group that brought the suit, saying that, affirmative action should be kiboshed, so to speak. So it begs the question that we might ask, why this group did not also challenge legacy admissions. Now, what is legacy admissions? It is a practice that all these colleges do, all these Ivy League colleges practice, that started in the 1920s to limit the enrollment of Catholic, Jewish, and Asian students, so that the Anglo-Saxon Protestant, so the WASPs, as they call it, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, would maintain their majority in these institutions. And so the legacy admission at the same time is, you go to Harvard, for example, or you go to Yale, so your children will get the bly, as they would say in Jamaica. They would get priority when it comes to admission, right? So it continues legacy admission. It's inherited admission, even when you don't have the marks to deserve it, to getting into these hallowed institutions. It is doubtful that the outcome would have been the same if they had challenged legacy admissions, because that Supreme Court, because some of them or most of them have been to these hallowed institutions, they wouldn't have agreed with that. So you would have gotten a different result. They wouldn't have been so quick to rule against it. Talk about going according to the law. That Supreme Court, most of them, they don't deserve to be sitting on there, because they're supposed to take off as much as they can their biased hats and leave them at the door when they go in there to interpret certain things. It is doubtful that the outcome would have been the same. Furthermore, affirmative action was the low-hanging fruit. So that's why it was targeted. It was low-hanging because it was for the poor and the dispossessed. They don't have the money and the means. Who cares what happens to them, right? Low-hanging fruit. The low-hanging fruit that benefits Black people, although as stated earlier, according to the United States Labor Department, white women have benefited most from affirmative action policies. It would not be to the benefit of those who were admitted and their descendants. So they wouldn't bring that with legacy admissions, right? They wouldn't bring that up, wouldn't fight against it. We might also note here that there are a few of the Zionist persuasion who are anti-Black racists. These are the Jews of the Zionist persuasion. Zionist Jews, not all Jews, Zionist Jews, who are anti-Black racists, as I stated, who are among the chief advocates of the push to oust Black people from Ivy League institutions, believing in their arrogance that Black people are intellectually inferior. And I dare say that about Mr. Ackman. He should go up against a lot of those Black intellectuals. He would not even be able to go through their door when it comes to what they know. Truly, suffering does not ennoble. And we know why through the eyes of the soul. Just because we have money doesn't make us intelligent. We just have to look at all these tech bros. Oh my goodness. Money does not equal good character and doesn't say anything about our souls. Doesn't say anything about whether the power of our critical thinking skills or what we'd call our intelligence. It doesn't. No matter how much money you have, it doesn't dictate that. Through the eyes of the soul, we know that we shift, as I said, according to the mask that we wear at any given time, the one with the most power. And in this instance, going back to this Jewish billionaire and all the Zionist Jews, the shift from mask ethnicity of Jew persecuted as black people, so Jew, black, and Romania, Roma, the three persecuted groups right now, and have been so, well, the Jews dating back thousands of years, black second for about 1500 years, and the Romani for about 500 years, to mask economic status. Right? So they go according to their status, the economic status, that mask economic status. And they don't remember about that masked Jew, because the most power happens to be in the mask economic status. Now, the destruction of DEI mandated by Project 2025 and the whitening of America are examples of the path to mediocrity in plain view, as we witness incompetent, unqualified individuals occupying positions about which they have not a clue. In other words, DEI is affirmative action for mediocre white males. That's what DEI is now in. That's for them. DEI. Most of them are suffering from AIS syndrome. Arrogant, ignorant, and stupid. And at a later date, I'll explain that. We see people in Congress heading committees without the qualifications, the critical thinking skills, the common sense, well, which is not not always common, and without a clue of how the government of which they are a part works. No understanding of Civics 101, believing in their arrogance, ignorance, and stupidity, AIS syndrome, that they're better qualified because of their whiteness. We see people in positions heading government departments not only lacking in character, but who are far from being the brightest of white America, incompetent, unapologetic, felons, fraudsters, and abusers. Indeed, failing upwards. This includes those who have money. Money does not, as I said before, good character, brilliance, intelligence, or common sense make. The possession of money only reflects who we truly are by our behavior. In other words, money, like power, does not corrupt. Doesn't corrupt us, but it reveals who we are. Let us take note that the white females who enable the destruction of DEI and support the affirmative action for mediocre white males will soon have their Negro moment, because they are supporting misogyny, and we see that in the Congress with Boebert and what was it, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and all those people, and Nancy Mace, when they're complaining about the misogyny. And what's that other, Elise Stefano, the misogyny that's being practiced with the members, the male members and leadership of the House of Congress. As a member of a victimized group, we must never enable the victimization of others. But we do, because we know that suffering does not ennoble. Never enable. When you see someone discriminating against another person, a target group, your turn's gonna come. If you enable it, it is a very slippery slope because it will one day come down to you. So when you see something wrong, and when you see someone is being abused, say something. If you can't do something, at least say something. And if you can do, you don't have to say, just do. Because one day it will become your turn. Now, burning bridges. We call that, okay, we can recall that souls on the lower rungs of the ladder of soul restoration know not what the meaning of shame is. They are too arrogant, overconfident, and filled with judgment, and have turned off the light of their conscience, hence the inability to self-reflect, feel shame, guilt, and remorse. Therefore, they cannot learn until they self-immolate, until they destroy themselves, burn themselves up. We need to know the truth about ourselves before we can be better if we so choose. If these souls are representatives of exceptionalism, then we must wonder what mediocrity looks like. With what we know of the soul's journey, what we've discussed throughout the different videos, as was previously discussed in the videos, keep reading, it was probably not our destiny in a given lifetime to be the best in that field. So if our best is not the best above somebody else, and so it should not matter if someone bests us, and I'm just using a poetic license here and creating a verb out of the word best. Each of us have different talents, gifts, destinies, and life journeys. This is why it is important for us to know the history of our soul and the journeys that we choose to make, or we have chosen to make. Because remember, we choose our journey. And so God never gives any of us more than we can bear, because we, with the counsel and advice of our guides, and we can either listen or not listen, we choose our journeys. And sometimes those journeys are so difficult that some of us choose suicide. Or when we are born, we decide not to bother because we don't think we can manage, and so on. And I explained that in my book, Another World Through the Eyes of the Soul, and also in other books in the introductory chapters. Now, this is important because indeed, inherent in negative exceptionalism is envy, traveling alongside our quest for power. History shows us that it is this inherent envy, the companion to that quest for power, driving exceptionalism, that pushes us to burn that bridge that was extended by others to help us and others in our group cross the river. So once we cross the river, we burn the bridge so no one else can get across. So we burn that, right? We burn it so no one else who comes after can get across. We must be number one, by hook or by crook. Burning the bridge helps to eliminate those we perceive to be in competition, or fear will rise to be our competition, proving that we are no longer the top dog. In other words, burning that bridge will enable us to keep others down, keeping our boots on their necks to ensure that they never achieve what we have. Israel, the state of Israel has benefited from the United Nations, because remember now, it's also the United Nations that allotted Palestinian land to them to form that state, and gave them, I believe, more than they left for the Palestinians. So they got a key to their country that was given to them by the UN. You know, it was decided. But up to now, the Palestinians have not been given back the key to what was their home. And even if you took part of it, give them back at least the key to the part that you're supposed to give back to them. So Israel benefited, but they said, okay, we'll go along with what the UN give us. And I think I read that in one of the statements, or some of the statements made by the founders of Israel. They said, okay, let's go along with that, but we know what our aim is, and our aim shall remain to drive them out, because we are going to control all of Palestine. But we will go along with the UN. It legitimizes us. And so we see now that they use the UN, and they'll go back to the UN crying, oh, look what Hezbollah is doing to us with the drones. Could you imagine what they're doing with these FPV drones? Could you imagine that? You invade someone's land and you're talking about, look what they're doing to us with those drones. The audacity of supremacists. And so you see what they're doing. And when they're ready, they try to destroy United Nations organizations. That is burning the bridge after you have used it, and others have given you that bridge to cross that river. You now turn around and you're burning that bridge so that nobody else can cross it. That's bad-mindedness. That's negative exceptionalism. And that's in the playbook of supremacist ideology and practices. Now, there are Black people who benefited from affirmative action in education and now believe and support individuals and or groups that have sought to undermine the act. Larry Elder, a Black Republican lawyer, politician, and political commentator who was admitted to Ivy League, Brown University, through an affirmative action program, is one such example. He never misses an opportunity to assail affirmative action, bash affirmative action. This is one example of burning the bridge once we have crossed the river. In this way, there will be fewer Black people who will have the chance to reach whatever station Mr. Elder has reached in his life. This makes him stand out and be exceptional as a Black man. We are reminded here of the Black scholar, and I won't say her name. Brilliant, no doubt, although some have questioned her ability to analyze. That's when the Berlin Wall came down. Who, without realizing what they were saying, said that they decided to change their party affiliation from Democrat to Republican because there were more opportunities to rise to a high position as a Black person in the party and in a Republican administration, choosing to reflect diversity. Because there were so few Black Republicans with this person's qualifications, there would be more Black people with similar qualifications competing for the same spot in a Democratic administration. Another example of burning the bridge is the baby boom generation. Having benefited from the New Deal and the social and other benefits that it offered that made them prosper and thrive, have engaged in an all-out effort to dismantle everything that helped them so that future generations, except a chosen few and their progeny, will never prosper. Beginning in the 1980s and continuing today with the current American Manchurian regime, we see the assault on the education system, health and research institutions, workers' rights, unions, public health, food and safety rules, allowing more poison and filth in our food and water, social safety nets for the less fortunate in society, children, and the elderly. That American dream that so many sought and found, they are now ensuring that it disappears as the middle class shrinks and the divide grows between the haves and the have-nots, sending the society hurtling back to the days of feudalism. For example, this generation has enjoyed the benefits offered by vaccines against many life-altering childhood diseases like polio, but now seek to dismantle the system, endangering the lives of future generations, as we see happening in America, as they deliberately spread misinformation and propaganda via various media. Most of the souls who misinform their listeners and others have been vaccinated, for example, with all the vaccines that we got as children at different stages, different age groups. They've been vaccinated, right? And they have vaccinated their children. However, during COVID, they worked from home, like a lot of those people on Fox News, wore masks when they went outside, and were among the first to receive the vaccine, even flying halfway across the world to get what was then a scarce vaccine. This is wicked. I won't say evil, because evil means it's a get out of jail free card, when you can blame a demon, right? Demon possessed you or something like that, or blame the devil. The wicked. On their part, we distinguish between evil and wicked, as I just said. No doubt these souls are true miscreants, agents of chaos and mischief, as they deliberately spread sickness, death, and at times life debilitating and life-altering long-term COVID, and sometimes life. And I put death before. I said sickness and death, and I put debilitating life illnesses, because sometimes life is worse. Living is worse than death. Yet, these are the same people, these miscreants, who say they are pro-life. Fancy that, right? They deliberately and they knowingly set out to harm people. And a lot of those people who listen to them, well, they just look at those people as being like stupid. But those people don't realize that. But each of us is responsible for our own actions. Can't blame anybody else. When we are pro-life, we do not have to bellow that from the rooftop as if we are trying to convince others, so they won't see that we really are not pro-life, that we really do hate life. Now, when we do, that sends the message, and perhaps we're covering, as I said, our actions that are contrary to the words that we bellow. Words often belie thoughts that actions reveal. In burning bridges, in our aim for negative exceptionalism, History also teaches us that we should not throw away the stick that we used to get up the hill or burn the bridge that we used to cross the river, because we might need that stick on our way down the hill or that bridge to cross the river again back to where we started. We never know in life. The state of Israel, as it tries to destroy the United Nations and its organizations, the International Red Cross, and other organizations, might one day need those organizations. History also teaches us that, as they say in Jamaica, where water runs once, it will run again. Where water runs once, it will run again. And you can think of the sea. Like many places, for example, in Florida, they always say that the sea will always come back to claim its lands. So, like you might, they say dump, like fill, landfills and whatever, and then you build on top of that. And this is where water used to be. Eventually, that water is going to, whether it's 100 years, 200 years, will find its way back there. So where water runs one time, it will run again. The state of Israel, as I explained before, was legitimized in the United Nations. It grudgingly accepted this, but had other plans and saw this as a stepping stone to their ultimate goal of emptying Palestine of Palestinians, except for the 15 to 20%. And they stated that, as I said, out of the horse's mouth, to be the hewers of wood, carriers of water, waiters and slaves, as discussed through the horse's mouth. Plan D, as previously mentioned, that's what they call it, Plan D, further clarifies the Jim Screechy plan in massacring in a decoy way. That way that would subject Palestinians to small-scale massacres in an effort to encourage them to leave their places of residence. We are witnessing Plan D, but with a large, humongous scale massacres of Palestinians. Now that the United Nations has outlived its use for Israel, it has at every opportunity sought to undermine and destroy not just UNRWA, which it was created for Palestinians. It was created, I think, back in 1949 when it came into being to help Palestinians, recognizing that they're refugees, and perhaps when they return to their home in Palestine. If we remember, it was the Quakers, what I called, at the founding there, the beginning of America with regards to Europeans. And of course, the African slaves that they brought in, because of course we know that the indigenous populations, or Native Americans, been there for thousands of years. So with the beginning of, the European advent into America, we know, right, that, where was I now? We know that there were two faces forming, the Puritans and the Pilgrims. Right, so you have slavery and the whole manifest destiny and the genocide of a lot of Native Americans, and then and I did mention slavery, and then you had the group of the Quakers, and so it was the Quakers who actually, also at the behest of the United Nations before UNRWA was formed, went into Palestine, Gaza, for example, and, provided sanitation services and, built homes and, education and what have you, and served Palestinians. And I call that the face, the Quakers, the face that is tends towards the light. because the two faces in America, one tends toward the darkness. That's Jim Crow, racism, slavery, what we see right now governing America. It's never left. They've actually looked as if they've won. They've never given up the fight, and the face tending towards the light, and that in the beginning was represented by the Quakers, right? And those two faces, towards the darkness and towards the light, constantly fighting at odds with each other. That's America. Now, where do we have here? Yes, so many agencies, they want to destroy all those agencies. Their projected aim, so the International Red Cross is also on their target list, as I said, and the state of Israel has projected its aim, against the Red Cross. When the government asked the Israeli High Court for permission to have another independent organization other than the Red Cross take charge of ensuring that the rights of Palestinian prisoners are protected, and the Israeli High Court, it's only for Israelis. When it comes to the Palestinians who live there, it's a kangaroo court. They're just as despicable as the rest of the population, most of the population in Israel at this time. Whilst the state of Israel might be able to do without the help of these organizations at the moment, other countries are not as fortunate. They need the help of these organizations, whilst the legal arms and the Security Council might be wholly ineffective, and my God, they are. They need to start over again. The other arms of the United Nations provide much for the world, and especially at this time when the world is in dire crisis, like the World Health Organization, for example. It's well needed. But Israel might best heed several lessons that history teaches us in these egregious actions in which it is engaged. The first two of these lessons that history teaches us is Tidefimi, tomorrow for you. Every puss at 4:00. Today for me, tomorrow for you. Every cat has its 4:00. Do not rejoice at my misfortune. Your turn is coming, and every cat has its day of reckoning to face. Now, we reiterate that Israel might one day need the support of the United Nations and other international organizations, as well as international humanitarian laws that it now breaks with impunity. It might very well rue the day of its cavalier disregard for these international organizations and international laws, and rue the day of its cavalier attitude towards the rest of humanity, its disregard for the rest, the majority of humanity. It is on a road paved with many unintended consequences. And a third lesson that history teaches us is that pride cometh before a fall. In Jamaica, they say, a high seat kill Miss Thomas puss. Miss Thomas puss cat, as I said in that poem, Miss Thomas omnipotent psychopathic puss. Miss Thomas's cat went up on this very high chair, too high, should not have been up there. and fell down. Actually, in the Jamaican thing, it fell down and broke its neck. So that's another saying that Israel should heed. And a fourth lesson that history teaches us, and this one I'll say as well in Jamaica: a cow never knows the use of its tail, doesn't recognize how useful its tail is until flies begin to cover its rump. Because a cow uses its tail to bat away the flies and other insects. In Jamaica, this is how they say it: cow never know the use I'm tail, will they say, till fly take up him backside. In other words, we never appreciate the value of something until we lose it. Take good care of what we have. And yet another lesson, this is the fifth one, that history teaches us, is when we dig a pit for others, we should dig too and ensure that the deepest one we've dug is for ourselves. In Jamaica, the saying is, when you are dig a pit for somebody, make sure say you dig two and the deepest one for you. When we burn bridges, it is like digging a pit for others, those who come after, but we might very well be spelling our own doom. We might have to cross that river again, as I said before, and might very well need that bridge. This burning of the bridge of negative exceptionalism is equal opportunity. When we do not discriminate and give everyone an equal chance, a fair chance, society is best served, for we will all rise above mediocrity. What is it about a lifts all ship? A rising tide lifts all ships. We will get the brightest and the best, and we all will excel. History teaches us, as I said, I should just keep reading, that a rising tide lifts all ships. When we do discriminate, these are incorrect deeds, they're sins that eventually lead to the fall of a society and its backward slide. And you can see that when we look at different societies in the past and we say, oh my goodness, it was such a thriving society, and no more you look at the people, you wonder, could these same people or descendants of these people have been that illustrious society like 400, 1,000 years ago? But so it is, and we know why. We've discussed this before, through the eyes of the soul, right? We know all of this. Now, the last point I'm going to discuss here with the Playbook of Supremacist ideology and practices is the cult of death and destruction and cannibalism that we see with supremacist ideology and practices. Supremacist ideology and practices is cannibalistic. It eventually eats its own. By its very nature of supremacy, it is always in a struggle to separate and segregate. It starts from the outside and works its way inward, very much like when we are at the table and start with the utensils that are furthest from the plate and work our way inwards. And that's when we're talking about fine dining here. You start from for example, the fork that's on the outside and work to the one, and you move till you move to the main fork, right? Next to the plate. Now, sorry. So you work from the utensils that are furthest from the plate and work our way inwards according to the outward in rule toward the plate, to the one closest to the plate. There must be some hierarchy because we're supremacists, all of us to some extent. The prosperity that comes with supremacist ideology is usually followed by destruction because supremacist ideology is cannibalistic. For example, it might use, as we discussed earlier, a militia, marauding gangs, and paramilitaries, like, in Sudan. That's what's happening now. They use the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces, to commit genocide. This was while I think it's Bashir was in power. And then now, this same gang, this same paramilitary arm has now challenged the government, even though Bashir is no longer the head of the government there. Now, the prosperity, as I said, oh yes, but eventually, once in power, then as in the Sudan, the external arm no longer with a boogeyman or enemy continues the fight for supremacy. It would be time for another boogeyman or enemy. Hitler had to eliminate the SA leadership because he feared that they would become a rival power and perhaps oust him. And if you think about the whore of Babylon that sits in the people's house, he was the founder of the SA, 4 million hooligans. And Hitler, after they helped Hitler to get in power, he had also wanted to control the army of 100,000, according to the Treaty of Versailles, executed him because he knew that he would probably overthrow him. And Hitler didn't want him in any positions of power because he knew he had no discipline, for one thing. He was not a critical thinker. He would just make a muck of things, and lo and behold, he's at the head of America right now. If Hitler were, he would never have him there, except when he wanted him to create chaos. Chaos. Remember that. The chaos agent. Now, the prosperity, okay, I did that already. I should keep reading. But, if I have to add, I have to add, right? Now, as I said, Hitler had to eliminate the SA leadership because he feared that they would become a rival power and oust him. Zionist Jews in Israel are now gleefully destroying Christian churches and villages in the occupied territories. And I wrote about that almost 3 years ago, right? Or 2.5 years ago. No, see? Don't need 4 eyes to have figured that out. And villages in the occupied, it's a direct poke in the eye of Zionist Christians in America, many of whom are so blinded, like the so-called ambassador, the know-nothing. It's craziness. Huckabee, or whatever his name is. Fooled. They're so blinded and fooled by the spin and the modus operandi. Many apologies offered by the state of Israel when they bomb a house or bomb a Christian church. They say, oh, sorry, oops, mistake, please give me a break. As discussed earlier, what will happen when the marauding settlers no longer have Palestinians or Bedouins to hunt or prey? Well, actually, they've started on Armenian Christians as well now. As each boogeyman, scapegoat, or enemy is dispensed of and we work our way inwards, another one emerges until at last only one man stands. Not a group, just one single man. A solitary man, because once there is more than one, we will continue to separate and segregate. Not a Jamaican saying, thief and thief, God laugh. God laughs when he sees two thieves in cahoots. That's what supremacist ideology, and that's what supremacists do. There's no honor among thieves. And by the way, I quote a lot of Jamaican sayings, but I do have a collection of them in one of my books called A Mouthful of Granny Tulu's Wisdom, a collection of Jamaican proverbs. It has some Anansi stories, some, the spider, and a couple funny poems, actually, laughable poems that I wrote. I think it's listed in below. If it's not, I will make sure that I list it below. Now, supremacist ideology and practices is a cult of death and destruction. This is evident with a lot of cults, ending in mass killings or suicides, such as the Jonestown Massacre, or groups or government of or countries that are prepared to kill their members or their citizens in false flag operations to create excuses to start wars and conflicts or achieve or force their own members or citizens to behave in the manner they desire. Many governments throughout the ages have done this. There are many countries in today's world who engage in such practices, including America and Israel. One example is the Baghdad bombings, which is between 1950 and 51, and I've mentioned that in I think it was maybe video 15 or 16, which was a series of 5 bombings and several attacks in the Jewish community of Baghdad in Iraq. And I think that was I think it was the oldest Jewish community in the world. Now, yes, one of the oldest Jewish communities in the world, comprising almost 20% of Baghdad's population, despite Israeli denials. Based on the first-hand account of one of the participants and the police investigations and records, there is no doubt that Israel and its agents were responsible for no less than 3 of the incidents. And the Iraqi-born Jewish historian Schleim, he in his book, and I'll try and list that below actually, but the reference is listed in my book Thoughts on the Past. He says this was to convince the Iraqi Jews to leave Iraq en masse and populate the new state of Israel, and to convince the world that Jews were under attack. Garner the sympathy of the world, especially that of the Americans, and show the urgency of having a Jewish state. Jewish businesses were bombed, as well as a synagogue in which 3 or 4 Jews killed, including a 12-year-old boy. Dozens of Jews were wounded, overall 10 of them in the synagogue bombing. And we'll recall, even during this attack, this war on Iran, they actually bombed the synagogue in Isfahan. And I think some books were burnt that are quite old as well. So they're not afraid. If you don't agree with them, they'll bomb you, whether you're a Jew, because Zionists is what they're concerned about. I don't care if you're Jews. They couldn't care less. If you're not a Zionist, well, who cares? Like Golda Meir, she couldn't care less about the Mizrahi. They were an Ashkenaz. So who cares, right? We tend to choose the mass that gives us the most power. The American Cultural Center was bombed, and the U.S. Legation Information Office was attacked to foment strife between the then Kingdom of Iraq and the United States at the same time, and garner support for the Zionist cause. Using the same modus operandi, or MO, Israel tried also to plant bombs targeting the U.S. Information Service and Library and other U.S. buildings in Cairo and Alexandria to blame the Muslim Brotherhood in what is known as the Lavon Affair around the same time. We witnessed this cult of death and destruction in America, where some believe that there must be some deaths to protect their Second Amendment rights, such as the late Charlie Kirk. The right to bear arms. According to these brothers, a few deaths each year is a small price to pay for the right to bear arms. What a travesty. Surely this is a cult of death and destruction and the offering of human sacrifice. That's what it boils down to, including school children who have to run for their lives, who must learn in school how to run for their lives from shooters. We also witness in America too many, perhaps as many as 40% of the population, who are willing to cut off their noses to spite their faces, to deny especially Black people anything that might be beneficial. Although a majority of beneficiaries who benefit from a program might be white voters will vote to destroy the program if they are led by their politicians and corporate entities to believe that Black people would also benefit. But then, yes, they can be led because they want to be led, because there is something that rings with this cruelty within them. Each of us is responsible for our own actions, and we can't blame the politicians. We also have to take responsibility. Although a majority of beneficiaries, where am I here? Okay, this is a truth that America, and especially those on the opposite side of the political spectrum, I'm talking about, the Democrats and all these people talking about consensus, they need to understand, if you want to say, the manner of beasts with what they're dealing. That's how that 40% feels. They're willing to cut off their noses to spite their faces because the hatred is so pernicious and so deep. It is not just so. Now, only by facing the truth can we adequately fight and defeat our, if you want to put it, demons. We cannot fight looking through rose-colored lenses or with other blinders on. The New Deal and Obamacare, SNAP, and masks during the COVID-19 pandemic provide us with examples of this dynamic. Many support the Affordable Care Act with all its flaws because it is a lot better than no type of health care at all. The Octopus has labeled it, and I speak about the octopus of strange bedfellows, and one day I will get to explaining that octopus that is operating in America. America is its home in this particular transition period, but its tentacles are spread all over the world now. And that's why you don't have an America first that's happening. No, they're not interested in that. It's, the ideology and what have you. Okay, so many, as I said, support the Affordable Care Act with all its flaws, because a little health care is better than none at all. The octopus, though, those back to the good old days politician, and this, they labeled it Obamacare, right? Obamacare, that means the Black man. That means Obama. by attaching the name of the black president to it. They know that they can succeed in dismantling it because the racism of this 40% is so pernicious that just the thought of that black president and anything black will turn them off. But they love the Affordable Care Act, and well, we don't want to say they're too stupid. Well, yes, we can say it. They're arrogant, ignorant, and stupid. So they refuse to inform themselves. And they want to be led, so they are led to realize that it's the same thing, even more than a decade after. After 16 years, many have been so misinformed that they're just realizing this fact that Obamacare is the Affordable Care Act. Will they vote to dismantle it, one would ask. And remember, this is a little dated, right? What I'm reading here. We shall see indeed if they will follow the playbook and cult to cut off their nose to spite their face. One thing of interest to mention here is the Black Panthers were the pioneers of the free breakfast program in America. Just a little history lesson. The Black Panthers, for miscreant souls, common human decency, for them, they call it socialism, communism, woke, and leftist. Common human decency, ensuring that children do not go hungry, or that everyone has a roof over their heads, able to support their families with the necessities of life, proper education. These things are common human decency, looking after the least fortunate and the most vulnerable in our society. That's common human decency. And if politicians did their job, we would have less need for charity. And for this 40% of America, and the back to the good old days politics, the Republicans in America, they would be called that. Conservatives here, common human decency, they say, is woke, and leftists, communists, and socialists. Just imagine the miscreants that we're dealing with. The GI Bill and black veterans is reflective of the deep and pernicious acts resulting from racism in America. Not unlike Jews of Ethiopian ancestry and the Druze soldiers in Israel, black soldiers in America who served their country, many sacrificing their lives in World War II and other wars, those who lived to returned home, to Jim Crow and its segregation and horrible discrimination and second-class citizenship. When these men shed their blood for their country, it is equal, but not after. Most of these men did not benefit in America from the GI Bill because they were black, where it, provided them, for example, with free education. More white people could have benefited, right? Because it could have gone on longer. But for the fear that black veterans might have figured out a way to benefit. And so what they did was they actually put it to states' right. When you want to enforce things and the great discrimination, especially in those red states, just say states' right, just like education. That's why they say states' right, let the states decide on education. Let the states decide, because they know at states' rights, the discrimination, the inequality will be practiced. Full Monty. Now we will, talk about this at a later time and read my book and you'll get all the details. And as a point of history, another history moment. I love history. We will note here that Jim Crow and segregation traveled with the American Army during World War II, even to the American base. And some of us, maybe many of us, do not know that, yes, America had a base in Trinidad. Jim Crow traveled there. And that base, so there was segregation even there. And Britain actually leased that base to America during World War II. Now, I'll just mention here that the athletes in the village, the Olympic village, during the 1936 Berlin Olympics, there wasn't any segregation in that village. No. And that was under Hitler. Another instance of this cult of death and destruction of supremacist ideology and practices was evident during the COVID-19 pandemic. While there were always and has always been anti-maskers, the movement took on an urgency and acceleration when the first statistics came out that Black people and other people of color were more susceptible to it for a variety of reasons, some of which would also make white people susceptible as well, like the tendency to, diabetes, high blood pressure, hypertension, underlying illnesses. So, you go to white America, same things, the same morbidities are there, right? But I should have been expected. The racist, supremacist, amoral and immoral administration, which is the same one that was there, the one that's here now, the American Manchurian regime, except it's worse now, at the time, and it's COVID czar. That's the man who wants to build a resort in Gaza. Who believes, as I said, I should keep reading, believes that this czar, who believes that Palestinians should be swept out of Gaza to make way for hotels, a resort, became even more determined than ever to withhold masks, gowns, and other things required to fight the pandemic. Once they found out that, like the Black and brown peoples were just dropping like flies, like in New York. It was just such a horror show. That's when they figured, and it was an election year, right? So, let me keep reading. So, no doubt, we might not be too far off to surmise that because it was an election year, there was a wish that as many as possible Black, Indigenous people and peoples of color would perish, meaning there would be less of them to vote for the opposition. Indeed, that discovery that it was these people who were more susceptible at that time to COVID was what you call when a life serves you lemon moment. What do you make? You make lemonade, right? A truly golden opportunity. So it was like October 7th, 2023 was also a when life serves you lemon moment, a golden opportunity for the big boys and the big girls. And see my book listed below. It is called, what is it called now? I can't even remember the title. The Black without a speck of gray, yes, without a speck of gray, the black and truth of truth, the black and white of truth and justice. Now, when I heard that, actually, the first time it came out that, black and brown people, peoples of color and indigenous peoples were the ones who were Native Americans who were falling like, dropping like flies with COVID. I said to my son, one of my sons, I said, oh, just watch. Oh my God, I wish they didn't have to say that. I wish they just kept it on the wrap, but they have to inform us so that we could take heed and better care of ourselves. I said, just watch now. Oh, now they're going to try any state that has a large population of BIPOC, they are going to try and withhold, because remember, it was very difficult getting PPI, masks and all of that stuff to combat COVID. I said, just watch, now they're going to withhold it. And so said, so done, so it was. And we have to remember at the same time, and that's when the anti-mask movement really took on. It went on steroids because, well, most of them, even though there were peoples of color in those anti-mask movements as well, they figured, well, yeah, it's just black people, BIPOC, black, indigenous, and peoples of color. BIPOC, only POCs, only them who are dying. We won't die. That doesn't apply to us, so who cares? And that's when they went on a roll. It was a time. And this is, it's proven, it's facts that I'm speaking, not conspiracy theories. Now, during, and it's a history teaches moment as well, during the time when I think smallpox was just sweeping, this is in the late 1700s, sweeping America, especially the East Coast, because at that time, like, the West was not inhabited by your Europeans at that time, just the indigenous Native Americans. You had Onesimus, who was an ex-slave, and I think it was John Adams. He said, not John Adams, but one of his relatives who was a doctor. I can't remember his name. He said, he told them that in his country, he told about what is it now, inoculation, and so that's what helped to save a lot of people from dying. But a lot of people wouldn't do it because they heard that it was something that was introduced by a black man, by a ex-slave. So they refused to have it done. Of course, they had also verified what he said, the doctors, with the Ottomans. And so it was. And so they did it, and it did end up saving a lot of lives. Now, we will note here that a pandemic, like any natural disasters, does not discriminate. In our arrogance, we believe that we could never become victims of a natural disaster or suffer from the pollution we create because we have borders and we have money. Unfortunately, some of us are so blinded by our arrogance that we do not realize the folly of it all. In the mere wink of an eye, anyone can become sick or a refugee. We could have all the power and wealth and lose it all in that mere wink of an eye because of a natural disaster, political upheaval, and civil war, or just at the whim of a tyrant. Anyone can become a refugee, climate or political, especially when a demagogue decides that they're going to confiscate our possessions. We have only to look at history, including the different pogroms, the kulaks, and the Ingrian Finns in Russia, and of course Jews from 1290 in England, Spain in 1492, or those in Lithuania during Stalin's time, who were dispossessed of their businesses and other possessions and deported to remote locations in the Soviet Union during Stalin's rule. And when we think of the Moors in the Iberian Peninsula, when they were kicked out of the peninsula, and if they didn't, according to, I can't remember now, the something another blue rule, where they had to marry a Spaniard, they couldn't marry amongst themselves. If not, they would lose all their possessions. That's the Moors. Even when we live in countries ruled not by invaders, that can happen to us, as was the case in Syria. Why we can become refugees overnight. White supremacists, anti-abortionists might easily waver in their conviction if they realize that their stance will result in the birth of more and black and brown babies because of women of color who will be less likely to circumvent the anti-abortion laws due to lack of financial resources. For America to get better and heal, it must face its demons and truths. Only then will souls bent on destruction not insert themselves into the imprint of America and its other masks. And as I say that, that goes for the enablers too, which, for example, if we want to take the Democratic Party, and they're filled with their racists and, bigots against different masks. But let us just, in broad strokes, say, enabling and talking about, the poor folks and the working class, meaning white working class, and not even thinking that the white working class, not all of them are Republicans, not all of them vote for despicable policies, and that the white working class is only about 50% of the working class as well. They have to stop this enabling and face, because they have policies, and face the fact that indeed these people will never vote otherwise unless they hit the bottom, and when they hit the bottom, they still don't care as long as they cut off their nose to spite their face, because a black or a brown child will benefit from universal health care. Or let's take the SNAP program. So many white, poor, rural folks, their kids benefit from that, but they don't care. They vote against it because they hear a black child is going to get free food, or a brown child's going to get free food. And until many in the opposition realize this, and they have to face it, that the racism, that's what's at the bottom of it. For a lot of people in America, it is so pernicious, that racism, they're willing to cut off their noses to spite their faces. They have to face that and stop enabling delinquency, because only then Will you allow people to recognize what they're doing and do better? Do not coddle. Do not listen to crocodile tears, because that is how and why America, why the judiciary is now filled. Like, let me just say that their society, their democracy has been dismantled because of what supremacist ideology and practices is really good at, is crying and playing the victim card. And then the other side, they fall for those crocodile tears. It's like Israel. Boots on the necks of the Palestinians, and then complaining, saying that the Palestinians are posing an existential threat to them. If you treat people properly, you won't have to look behind your back. We will note here that the despicable practice of honor killing, for example, is reflective of supremacist ideology and practices. Misogyny is supremacist ideology and practices. A case of religious misogyny is the example, and another history thing here, it's a current history, of Coptic women and girls in what is dubbed jihad of the womb. These Coptic women in Egypt, Egyptian women, by the way, at least 65% of the inhabitants of Egypt are Egyptians. They're not Arabs. Who disappeared, these women who disappeared, they were kidnapped, beaten, tortured, and raped, by criminal gangs in Egypt. And many of them are forced to convert to Islam. And I think it is still occurring, because the reference I got here was 2025. So that's still occurring. And I thought I would just mention that. Supremacist ideology and practices often have no red lines. They have no sense of principle, none whatsoever. This is often in the most extreme of cases, which Israel is. The Nazis were extreme, but even they had red lines. As I mentioned before, when it came to animal rights and protection, some have certain red lines that they will never do, even if we do not agree with them. And as I said, the Nazis, when it came to animals, for example, they even had in their laws, they enacted some of I think it's probably the first set of laws of animal protection and rights laws in Europe, and probably in the world. And by the way, Plutarch was very concerned. Plutarch, who is the Greek philosopher, biographer, he wrote Parallel Lives, and historian, educator, high priest of the Oracle of Delphi. The Nazis, for them, if you hurt an animal, you probably end up in the concentration camp. They had even rules for cooking lobsters. The water had to be boiling, and I mentioned that in one or two of my other videos, had to be boiling at a certain temperature, and then a certain amount of time to dunk the live lobster into the boiling water. Very strange. And of course, we know Hitler loved his dogs. I mean, he was allowed to have his beloved Alsatian while he was incarcerated with what I call that Mickey Mouse sentence for treason that he got. He spent about 9 months there. But Israel has no red lines. That is the supreme of the supreme supremacy playbook of supremacist ideology and practices, because the cruelty they show to animals, even using those dogs that they import, some of them from Belgium, and use them to grape Palestinian prisoners or to feed upon the living and the dead. They have now injured dogs in the West Bank. They have no red lines. That's one of the reasons they are indeed the poster child in this time for supremacist ideology and practices. And we're almost done. I could take this over to the other video, but I'll just finish there because I want to get into debunking. It's kind of fun, more fun. The other one, talk about Jesse Owens and, you know, Amo, Wilhelm Amo, and, you know, some other historical persons used to debunk supremacist ideology and practices. So, no red lines. They have none. Creating reality on the ground, that's another thing that they do. Supremacist ideology and practices, that's part of their playbook. Excuses. In what is an Israeli modus operandi, we see Israel trying to create facts by eliminating, decapitating the heads of Hamas and chief negotiator and Hassan Nasrallah, and they've recently done that in Iran, for example. That's their modus operandi. To effectively stop or attempt at any attempt at a ceasefire or a peace deal. They do not want peace. They believe in forever wars, because that's how they're able to survive. If they do not have that forever war, there will be civil strife there in Israel. There's going to be. They did so in 1948 by assassinating Count Folk Bernadotte, the United Nations chief negotiator. After all, we cannot negotiate if there are no representatives, no negotiators. We see them slaughter families who might have acted to bring some order to Gaza because they commanded respect. We see them slaughter law enforcement personnel in Gaza who would bring help to maintain order and oversee the distribution of aid, just to force into existence their excuse that the aid is being looted. Israel has also hired and armed groups from Gaza to loot aid trucks, and I spoke about that a couple months after October 7th. They never stopped until they achieved that aim by providing guns to gangs, imposing starvation, killing aid work, making unalive aid workers, so that now the United Nations can no longer deliver the aid it is allowed to provide, because Israel blocks just about everything from entering the Gaza Strip, including wheelchairs, high caloric foods such as dates, baby formula, medicines, tents, and blankets. But as history teaches us, when we sow the seeds of chaos, we will reap a harvest of chaos. Chaos is contagious. This chaos that Israel is spreading will worm its way into Israel. The road is paved with unintended consequences. And remember what my guide said, that Israel will become the part of a one state and not the one state that it envisions, and how it is not a question of if, but one of when, and how it is absorbed will depend on their actions starting from this February forward. Let the record stand. This chaos, as I said, will worm its way into Israel. The road is paved with unintended consequences. History is littered with the results of these malign actions. We cannot create destruction and chaos all around us and expect that it will not consume us. Most often, sooner than we think. When the arsonist starts a fire in a dry season, he will not be able to control it. Starvation led to cannibalism during the Holodomor and in the Gulag in the Soviet Union. No doubt, Mr. Blinken, and I wrote this, Anthony Blinken was the Secretary of State, and others say that Israel tried to deliver aid, but looting prevented it. Starving people might indeed loot trucks for food. We wrote, and as I said, I wrote it in the October, almost a year ago, more than a year ago actually, sorry, because this is taken from my book, which was published in September 2025, so a year ago before, so 2024. And of course, since then we know Israel laid siege, a crusader-style siege to Gaza. For almost 3 months, more than 90 children died from starvation. Their children and babies, still now, because they're not getting any aid. It's just all a facade. And we're focused on Iran. I'm not. I'm focused on all places. Babies with hollow eyes, dry skin stretched over emaciated bodies, too weak even to cry or to smile, walking bag of bones. Every day of this medieval siege still continue with their massacres of babies, especially babies and children. Yeah, where they used aid to bait, as if they're baiting some wild animals and you go out to hunt for food. Or like pigeons when we throw corn in an area, and when they had the aid trucks and they cordon off the place, and of course they had also hired these anti-Muslim mercenaries from America, and so they would cordon off the place like pens. Palestinians would have to line up in those pens, and then like pigeons, you know, when we throw corn in an area and hit the lids of pots to lead the pigeons to feed. Truly, truly, truly. But the thing is, we memorialize, and I say I, through my guides, we memorialized, wrote and spoke about all of this before they happened. All my writings and the books, 2024, and my videos from back then, just everything is, we see it. It's clear as day now. Clear as day. And it's all so very sad. And no one's doing anything about it. Well, as I said, this video was for entertainment purposes only. Supremacists, we have to remember, and this actually is the last one, they have no sense of gratitude. Why? They feel entitled. Everyone owes them and must bow to them. They're never satisfied. And because they're never satisfied, and they have no sense of gratitude because they're arrogant, they want all, they eventually lose all. Well, as I said, this video is for entertainment purposes only. And of course, you know, as I also say, they weaponized, you know, the victim card. We know all of that stuff, right? Thank you for visiting my channel. Please do not forget to subscribe, give a thumbs up for like, share, and leave a comment. As usual, I end with this: none of us is without blemish, and although I appear harsh, I must deliver the messages as I get them. What I do and the collective, you know, it's harsh. But all my brothers, including my Zionist Israeli brothers and those reincarnated souls in the American Manchurian regime, I pray and I hope, but one day, maybe not in this lifetime, but eventually they will get there. There's redemption for all of us at some point. At some point, even those who find themselves on the lowest rung of the ladder of soul restoration will tire of it and decide to ascend those rungs of the ladder of soul restoration. I've walked a mile in many shoes, as I said in my last video, or the video before. Many shoes. Been there, done that. Not gone to such low rungs, but been there, done that. That's why I'm here right now. I'm doing the task that I chose to do and have been called to do because of those many arduous journeys that I've been on, coming on this earth as a rescue soul, but sometimes lost my way. But so it is. Now, as usual, hate hitching a ride, hate a contagion, a cancer metastasizing, an opportunistic bacteria, the cloud waiting to block the sun, hate waiting to hitch a ride on the train of love, hate the rat on its rat passage, hate hitching a ride on the boat to the plague, hate the bedbug waiting for our suitcase, hate the roach riding on our coattails, hate the shadow always lurking behind, sometimes longer than us, hate just lurking behind the thin curtain, waiting for its turn on center stage to take us to a place not so far away, a blast back from civilization to barbarism, from knowledge back to ignorance, from wisdom back to impudence. Hate never takes a holiday, always looking for the opportunity to ride on the train of love. To hitch a ride on the train of love, hate inhabits the same house as love within us. Remember, none of us is without blemish, and all of us live in glass houses. And we are not here to have dominion over the fowl of the air, the fish in the sea, or the beasts in the fields. We are not here to rule or have supremacy over our brothers. We're all tenants on this earth, so let us be good tenants. Let us take care of ourselves and of each other. Let us trod ever so lightly and take care of this planet, our temporary home that we call Earth, and all the creatures that dwell thereon. And remember always that there is something that is greater than us. That is the fatherhood of God. And we respect and show our love for that something that is greater than us by loving, respecting, taking care of the planet, of ourselves, and of our brothers. That's the brotherhood of man. May we never try to flee our conscience so that we will always do correct actions. May we learn to walk a mile in our brother's shoes so that we can see the humanity in each other. May we respect the differences in each other and know that our Creator has no chosen few. May we find comfort in the knowledge that each of us is slated for redemption and none is excluded. May we find solace in the knowledge that it is not a question of if, but one of when each of us shall return to our Father. May we know that we are just tenants, once again, on this earth, and take care of each other, the earth and all the creatures that dwell thereon. May we always adhere to the divine principles of the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of man, doing unto others or unto others as we would have them do unto us. Love. That which I do unto my brother, I do unto myself, for I am what I am, my brother's keeper. May the tiny shrouds of light forever illuminate our path through the dark. May peace forever reside within us and between us. One divine, universal love.